Merrick for the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, representing 62 First Nations.
Welcome. Garrison City Grand Chief MKO, 26 First Nations.
Good afternoon, I'm Derek Niepanak. I'm Chief of the Minnegozi Anishinaabe. We're the largest Treaty 4 community in the Treaty 4 territory, which is both in Saskatchewan and in Manitoba. We also have a lot of families in our community from Treaty 2. I have a very powerful weapon in my pocket, and that is my right to vote as a Manitoban in the upcoming election. I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about what your platforms will look like and how you will address the issue of confidence that we currently struggle with as Indigenous people in dealing with the provincial governments. Miigwech.
Hi, my name is Florence Blacksmith. I'm from Cross Lake, Michigamak Cree Nation. I'm the acting chief. I'm here for Chief David Munias.
Hi, I'm Chief Larson Anderson, the Norrie House Cree Nation.
Good afternoon, Chief Shirley Ducharme, Opipanapiu in Cree Nation, South Indian Lake.
Chief Richard Hart, Bunbonbee Cree Nation.
Chief Heidi Cook, Mississippi Cree Nation.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Chief Norman McKay from Barons River, where the original Treaty 5s were signed back in 1875. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chief Roland Hamilton, Blood Rain First Nation.
Afternoon, Councillor Tranquilagi from Dakota Teepee First Nation.
Good afternoon, Jason Daniels, currently the Chief of Swan Lake First Nation.
Donna Sutherland, Council Member for Peguis First Nation, here on behalf of Dr. Chief Sandberg.
Good afternoon, welcome. Murray Clear Sky, Chief Owewe Sikapo, Treaty 4.
Councillor Ferland Barker, proxy for Hollowwater First Nation.
Councillor Leah Fontaine, Black River First Nation, acting chief, also proxy for Chief Kent.
Good afternoon, Hubert Watt, Cold Lake First Nation. Good afternoon, Michael Yellowback, Chief from Mantu-Sibi Cree Nation.
Good afternoon, Chief Jordan Hill from Shimada First Nation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm a proxy for Chief Elvin Flett, St. Teresa Point and Sinew Nation, Treaty 5 adhesion. Good morning. Good afternoon. Sorry.
Chief Wilfred McKay, Rolling River, Anishinaabe, Treaty 4.
Good afternoon, Chief Betsy Kennedy, War Lake First Nation.
Good afternoon, Chief Kyra Wilson, Long Plain First Nation. I know that we will probably have time for questions after, so I'm looking forward to all the information that you're going to be sharing today, and I'm I guess excited for the next little while. We have this provincial election coming up, and we have some really important matters that are impacting our communities, our First Nation population in the urban centers. So I'll be asking more questions. I guess the biggest thing for me, just recognizing that there is no representative here from the Conservative Party. So let's just make that be known, that there are no PCs at the table here. So my vote is definitely not going to be going in that way. So I just want to say miigwech for each and every one of you here today. I acknowledge that you're here in front of us and willing to share some of your platform. Miigwech.
Hello, Chief Gordon Blue Sky. I'd like to welcome here to my community, Broken Head of Ojibwe Nation, Paskanabuizibing. And I too am also making note that the invitation was disregarded by our PC leader here in Manitoba. And from my perspective, that's a sign of disrespect to my community as well. So I'd like to just welcome you here and say Kichi Miigwech, and also we'll be looking forward to question period. Thanks.
Hau mataki api, tashunka luta wakati amache apero. Tanse to temak, wapi mikisiu, nishnakazan. Bujun denoi maganituk, wabana kut ndigo, bujun do tem. Kagi wata suniga mingin doonji, but you wasa waite in doonji. Over there in doonji. Apache jikendam pijaya na ma broken head king isnakate away shkoniganing. How do you do? I'm Wab Canoe. I did my best to say that in Anishinaabe, Moen, Dakota, and Cree as well. And Betsy, I'll work on the Dene for next time too. Very happy to be here, joined by my colleague Ian Bushy, and I'm the leader of the Manitoba NDP, which means I'm running to be the premier of this province in this coming election. And I'm running to be the premier because I want to make healthcare better in Manitoba, including for First Nations people. And I want to make economic opportunity more widespread, including on reserve in this province. So Chief Blue Sky, I very much sincerely appreciate your welcome and your hospitality here. And I want to say that it's, I'm very humbled to be here in front of all the esteemed leadership of the Chiefs in Assembly, as well as the Grand Chiefs who are here today. And I very much look forward to sharing some of our message with you because I believe that it will resonate with you. Miigwech Bizindayik.
Oh, Miigwech, Ian Bushy, the NDP MLA for Kiwatnuk, which encompasses the entire northeast section of Manitoba. But first and foremost, I'm a proud member of the Hollow First Nation. One of the things that I do and what I'm doing here and why I've decided to run provincially in 2019 as well as today is because I think it's important for our people to be on all sides of the table. I've been on that side of the table, being a former chief of my community, and I realize those gaps that exist till this day, that we need to do our best to close those gaps. So we're very interested in the conversations that we've already had, are going to continue to have to help us address those issues that all our communities are involved in. Because as much as the PC government here in Manitoba wants to say First Nations issues are federal issues, we're also all Manitobans here. So we want to do our best to close those gaps as best we can. And that's why I'm here, and that's a goal of mine. Miigwech.
Anin Tansi Buzu, Dougal Lamont Nindishnakaz. I'm the leader of the Manitoba Liberal Party and MLA for St. Boniface. I'm ever so grateful for the treaties and because they afforded people like me the opportunity to settle in these territories. And I acknowledge we're on Treaty 1 territory and the homeland and birthplace of the Métis, but also here in Broken Head, the home, wait, am I on the wrong? Did I get the treaty wrong?
No, it's Treaty 1.
Oh, sorry. No, but I was going to say, sorry, but I also recognize this is the birthplace of Tommy Prince, who is an extraordinary individual. And we recognize the harms of the past, the harms of the present, and our obligation to treaty people is to reconcile and make amends. We have to acknowledge the truths of the past. We have to grieve and mourn them. And we have to do what we can to walk a new path together, a shared path towards a better future. I'd like to acknowledge Grand Chief Kathy Merrick for her leadership. with the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs and each of the elders and dignitaries from each of these individual and diverse nations, and I'm looking forward to sharing our platform with you today. My name? Yes, sorry, it's Dugald. My first name is Dugald. It rhymes with Googled. And Lamont is my clan name. Actually, Lamont is a clan, a Scottish clan that I belong to. And it means one who speaks the law. It means law speaker. So that's what my family, we have a lot of lawyers in my family, but back in the day, we were the people who settled disputes. So that's why we're called Lamonts. Thank you.
Very quickly, I'd like to introduce our elders, please. The elders who advise the chiefs and the elders who advise in our communities and hold the traditional knowledge of our people. And Tashunka Duta, Pidawiyapia for announcing your name. Elder Dennis Whitebird, former treaty commissioner and longtime chief of his home community of Rolling River. Go ahead if you want to add more. Quick.
No, kami ho ng bisnikas, titibinay being doon sa magkwento dem.
Josh Neshi Kwanin, Agawi Kwedongang Doji, otherwise known as Florence Painter, Santa Bay First Nation. You got you.
Ozo ganinga kita Henry Roberts nisnikas kinozeusti ganing piunji miguet tikit maganin ebi sa ane to ina magwana mata pian to ita mimagokcha nisnabek miguet.
Puso sangiraboy sa kanay kandisnikas kanagjajak so jajak to them. My English name is Mary, Meitoyashing, Lake Manitoba First Nation. Thank you.
Robert is my English name, Matoyash, my family name, Lake Manitoba. I'm her, I guess, sore half.
Joe, Jesus Napanikas, Mikinak join and Mikasagita Kong with the Miondose. Good afternoon, my name is Harry Bone. I'm an elder from Kishkoin First Nation. Miigwech.
Thank you very much, elders. Grand Chief, did you want to introduce anything before we proceed?
When we were preparing for our 35th anniversary AGA for this week, we sent out an invite to all the party leaders, and I thank you for being here and to be able to answer and to be able to relay to the Chiefs Assembly of your platforms and your platforms pertaining to our people and what changes you're going to bring and what expectations that we do have. And then there'll be an opportune time for the chiefs to be able to ask questions to you as well. So that's how we're going to be. So I thank the chiefs, and that I just want to make mention there's 165,000 of our people in the province of Manitoba. The highest percentage of our people nationally is in Manitoba. So we expect bigger, better, moving forward for Manitoba, from Manitoba, for our people. Egosani.
Thank you very much, Grand Chief. So we'll start from my right, I guess. So Tashunka Duta, huh? Let them pick? Oh no. Tashunka Duta, you can go. You can come up here if you like.
Check, check. Hey. So hello again. I'm very happy to be here. This is a consequential election. Manitobans are looking for change at the ballot box this year, and I am here today to ask for your support. Specifically, in a humble way, I ask for your support in your home communities, but also to appeal to your members who live off reserve to come out and vote this year and be part of bringing in a new government here in Manitoba. Our team has been working very hard these past number of years to hold the current government to account. And I know that people from all walks of life have seen the shortcomings of the current approach. Cuts to healthcare, emergency closures, an economy that's not working for everyone because the cost of living is going up too quickly, too high. Manitoba Hydro not only having a huge impact on the homelands of many of your peoples, but also just the cost of Manitoba Hydro going through the roof. And I know that that's a real cost of doing business for many First Nations across the province. And so where the current government has failed, our team has a strong plan to fix the situation. We also have a strong team. 1/3 of our current caucus is made up of First Nations people. So we have the opposition benches in the Manitoba legislature, and 33% of those seats are taken up by First Nations people. In terms of the candidates that we put forward, we go out and win the swing seats in this coming election, we will increase the number of Indigenous representatives sitting in the Manitoba legislature. And I believe that that's an important step because it sends a message to Anishinaabe, to Kojas, to the little kids in our communities. It doesn't have to be politics. But whatever it is that they want to do, whether it is politics or business or sport or art or any area of achievement, that they can do it too. And I think that that's important. But I also want to reflect on the fact that it's important for the non-Indigenous kids in this province as well. The non-Indigenous kids in this province who see our team being sworn in, for them, there's never a doubt that we should have Indigenous representation in the highest levels of the province. There's never a doubt about what an Indigenous person can achieve. And I'm filled with a lot of hope and a lot of optimism about what this province is going to be like when that generation are the decision makers and the business leaders and the influencers in Manitoba. So we've been putting on this work, and we're ready to take the next step. I'll be asking for your support to become the premier. Our team will be asking for your support to form our next government here in Manitoba. On the healthcare front, it has to start with staffing. We have to bring more nurses and more doctors into the system. And I'll tell you what, we have one heck of a success story when it comes to developing First Nations people to work in our healthcare system about 100 feet from where we're gathered right now. My beautiful, talented wife, Dr. Lisa Monkman, is working in that clinic right next door, caring for people in the community and in the surrounding region, and she's able to deliver that form of primary care because of the investments of current and past generations of leaders here in the Broken Head Ojibwe Nation. And so I say miigwech, and I also pose a question. How many more Dr. Lisas can we create in each of your communities by investing in education, by investing in healthcare, and by sending a message that now is the time for all of our peoples to participate in building this province together. And so while we want to invest in the provincial healthcare system at a global level, a general level, a high level, I also know that there are many healthcare facilities, not unlike the one that I'm talking about here, in many of your communities. And I want to say that the era of a provincial government not being an adequate partner when it comes to healthcare in Manitoba, should we form government, will be over. Where you have new facilities in communities like Norway House or Pimichigamak, or facilities on the horizon in regions like Island Lake, the homeland of the Anishinaabe. Our provincial government will be a partner in helping to make sure that you can staff those facilities. And so let's work together on fixing healthcare in Manitoba, including moving forward the health transformation file that many of you have worked so hard on. When it comes to the economy, we know that the future of Manitoba's economy is going to be an energy economy. I see Mark Sweeney here today, and I congratulate him and the partner First Nations on the announcement. They had a lot of good media coverage this past week. And so not only do we need to think about how can we address the past and ongoing impacts of Manitoba Hydro and create economic opportunity in First Nations and across Indigenous Manitoba, but we also need to pursue those new opportunities, like hydrogen, like being able to export our energy products to other markets. We need to do this in a way that respects the earth, that respects the water. But this last piece is very, very important to me. We also need to do it in a way that puts local people to work. We need more jobs across Manitoba, and we need more jobs in First Nations communities. There are so many issues that we want to tackle around poverty and addictions and family life. And to me, a huge part of those conversations has to be being able to deliver to young people in your communities and in our communities a good job. Good job might not mean everything to everybody, but it means something. When you're trying to answer those questions, who am I, what am I doing here? Well, if you can say, I'm a janitor, I'm a miner, I'm a teacher, that's a start. And so these things are very, very important. I want a good job available to people in every region of this province because it's not just about the paycheck. Absolutely, the paycheck is important. But having a good job also provides dignity, self-respect, discipline, and self-worth. And these are good things that I want for everyone in our province. So let's work together on them. In closing, I wanted to share a story of something I experienced just over a week ago at a ceremony, and it relates to a lot of the advocacy work that Grand Chief Merrick and Chief Wilson of Long Plain have been engaged in. So just over a week ago, I was at Sundance, Lakota Sundance in Rosebud, South Dakota. And I know many of the folks in the room are familiar with the Sundance Arbor, big circle, tree of life in the center. When we were there, at the start of this ceremony, this family from Rosebud, the Brave Bull family, they brought a headstone to the Sundance grounds, and they asked to bring it into the circle. And so this gravestone, it looked like the ones you see in the movies, Saving Private Ryan, the kind in the military graveyards in the States. It's a white marble headstone, and it's oriented vertically. And the U.S. military had delivered this to the family. As it turns out, what had happened is that this Brave Bull family, a year ago, repatriated the remains of one of their loved ones who died in a boarding school in the States. And so this is a story that many of us are familiar with. Many of you as leaders have been undertaking searches of former residential schools in your home communities. But for the people of Rosebud, South Dakota, they have made the decision to bring their loved ones home. And so this Brave Bull family brought home the bones of this girl who died in Carlisle Industrial School. And the American military sent a tombstone for her to be commemorated with. And I think they did a good job. On one side, it said Ta Chanupawi, her pipe, her Lakota name. On the other side, it had the government name that she was given at Carlisle, Dora. But then the English translation of her Lakota name, her pipe. And then, because our people didn't have last names at the time, it explained who she was in family terms by saying, daughter of Brave Bull. April 21st, 1888. As it turns out, this young woman led a remarkable life. She was at the Battle of Little Bighorn when her people prevailed over the U.S. cavalry. And she was at the massacre at Wounded Knee And that's when they took her from her people, because she was a survivor of that terrible tragedy. And they put her in the Carlisle Industrial School, and she was there for a year or two before she passed away. Now, what took place with this family, these were the grandmas. These were the Kunshis, these were the grandmothers of this Brave Bull family, people who we would regard as elders in our community, and they got us, me, and 4 other guys who were at the Sundance to carry the headstone into the Sundance Arbor. They set it up on the west side of the arbor, facing the tree, and then they built an altar around it. And over the course of the 4 days of the Sundance, they did a lot of ceremonies with it. First day, we set it up. Second day, they brought sacred food, bison, buffalo meat, chokecherry. They put it in front of there to feed this young woman. Third day, they came and they sang songs from the Native American church. Fourth day, they brought a cradle board, beautiful beadwork, tiny, tiny beads, ledger art, Lakota horses along the side of it, Minnie Mouse on the top. How we like to do things for our kids. And over the course of those 4 days, we saw this family grieving and praying for and welcoming home the spirit of their loved one. And what I was thinking about over the course of this, the moment I put my hand on that headstone, I was overcome with a powerful feeling of emotion. Everything that I had experienced with my dad being a survivor of a residential school, the story of him sharing a bunk bed with a child who was killed in that residential school, the ups and downs that we had growing up with him, the journey of healing, him being my best friend before he left this world, it all kind of flooded forward within that 1 second that I put my hand on the headstone. And then to watch these grandmas take care of this thing in such a beautiful and sacred way was very, very powerful. And it made me reflect on a couple things. First and foremost, when I looked at these grandmas who were taking care of this headstone, in terms of where they were in the family tree relative to the person there, you folks who've been working on the issue with these families who want the landfill to be searched, you know that there's one of these daughters, Cambria, and that she has a stroller with a little one in it. Now imagine that little one having a great-great-grandkid. That's who these grandmas were in terms of the family tree. And I looked at that and I thought, they never forgot who this person was, this person that had been taken from them. They never forgot what her name was. They never forgot where she fit into their family tree. And that meant a lot to me because it made me realize these families that we're talking about, that you were helping, they are never going to stop looking. And they are never going to forget the person that's been taken from them. And so whether we do this land search now, as we are proposing, and I think we have to do it now, time is of the essence. We need to secure a conviction of the person who is alleged to have done these terrible crimes, or whether this family has to wait 145 years just like this Lakota family did. They are never going to forget. And so justice has a long memory and casts a long shadow. But one of the things that I think that we can do in this country today by working together on this coming election is to begin to turn the page and embrace a brighter tomorrow. Which brings me to the second point that I was thinking about watching these families conduct their ceremony and express their grief in such a beautiful and ceremonial way in front of God. And that was that I feel very proud to come from a community that would never forget one of our own. I feel very proud to come from people who will never leave somebody behind. And that's why I'm running to be premier. Because I want Manitoba to be like that. I want this great province, this potential that each and every one of us see, whether we step forward to be a leader or a staff person, but pursuing this common vision of building something better than what is here today, that's what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to make Manitoba into the place that doesn't leave anybody behind, that remembers who each and every person is, and that lives up to that phrase, every child matters. Every person in Manitoba has a gift. And so that's what I want to work on with you. Not just the policy, but the philosophy, the mission, the vision to make this place better. And I know we can make life better together. Miigwech.
I'm just going to head up to the podium. So again, I'm Dougal Lamont. I'm leader of the Manitoba Liberal Party. And the reason I entered provincial politics is because that's where I think the real change in Canada needs to happen. When you look at the discrimination that Indigenous people face, it's the worst in provincially run systems. And in Manitoba, you've been treated worse than anywhere else in Canada. I think we need to recognize that. And people sometimes act as if the Manitoba Liberals are something new or that we're from Ontario. In fact, we're the oldest party in Manitoba. In fact, this year is an important anniversary, 2023. In 1953, 70 years ago, it was a Manitoba Liberal government that passed legislation that belatedly recognized the right of all First Nations people to vote in provincial elections. That was 7 years before it was done at the federal level. And on a personal level, I'm lucky enough to have known First Nations folks my entire life. My aunt was a law partner with Marion Meadmore, who was the first First Nations woman ever called to the bar in Canada. In fact, they started the first all-women law firm in Manitoba in the 1970s, and they worked on child welfare cases in the 1970s and 80s. And my aunt lived with us. She lived on the top floor of our house, and Marion would pick up my aunt who didn't have a car. So when I was around 8 or 9, I thought it was perfectly normal for a First Nations woman to be a successful lawyer who was also clearly doing better than my aunt because my aunt couldn't afford a car. So I remember my aunt would come home from work and she would talk about how awful it was that we lived in a society where you could have all your freedom taken away just on the word of one social worker. No evidence, no defense, just someone's opinion. And she was talking about the injustice of child and family services. And my own personal political coming of age really happened around the defeat of the Meech Lake Accord. Politics was already pretty exciting at the time. There was a free trade election, the Berlin Wall was falling, and the PC government of Brian Mulroney tried to rewrite the Canadian Constitution without including Indigenous people at all. There was no consultation. Not only that, the Meech Lake Accord gave every single province a veto on changing the Constitution, which meant that any province in Canada would be able to say no to First Nations who wanted to see the Constitution changed. It effectively made all future changes or enhancement to Indigenous rights impossible. As it happens, my dad and uncle were both lawyers. My dad was a volunteer advisor to then Manitoba Liberal leader Sharon Carstairs, and in Canada, we were one of the only parties anywhere, at any level, to stand with First Nations against the Meech Lake Accord. In 1988, Sharon Carstairs went from having 1 seat to having 20, and because there was a minority government situation, Elijah Harper was able to play the role of actually saving Canada. He had to break with his own party to say no, but when he did what he did, he became my hero for life. And when I say he saved Canada, that is also what Pierre Elliott Trudeau said at the time. He said, "Les Autochtones ont sauvé le Canada." And I was a witness to that power of democracy, the power of what can happen when one person has the opportunity to change history, and they make it, and they do so. And I have to say, I once told Cindy Woodhouse, First Nations and Indigenous people keep saving settlers from ourselves. When history falls into your hands, you keep turning it into a better direction for all of us. There are tens of thousands of people in Manitoba and across Canada who are only alive today, settlers and the descendants of settlers, because First Nations helped them. And I am deeply, deeply grateful for that. From Chief Pegwis to John and Betsy Ramsey to Louis Riel to Phil Fontaine and Elijah Harper, and now I will actually say leaders like Chief Kyra Wilson and Grand Chief Merrick, who are standing up for justice for everyone. The only reason we even have rights in this province at all is because of Indigenous leadership working with settlers, because Louis Riel brought together people. And in fact, one of the demands of the Manitoba Act was to say Canada must sign treaties with First Nations as a condition of joining Canada. And as I said, First Nations have been treated worse by the government of Manitoba, in my view, than any other province. I think the statistics show that. CFS, incarceration rates, life expectancy. And while I will also add, while the province of Manitoba has refused to provide services to First Nations Manitobans by saying it's a federal jurisdiction, the provincial government is funded on a per capita basis. That means every single person, every single Treaty First Nation, living on reserve or not, is being counted for the federal government's funding for this province. And the Manitoba government does not share it. That has got to stop, and we want to give it back. And I do want to say I'm very proud of one major accomplishment as MLA, that during the first year of the pandemic, the entire freshwater fishing industry was disrupted. There was a backlog at Freshwater Fish Marketing Corporation because the borders were closed. We went to the federal government and persuaded them to change the surplus food program to allow freshwater fish as part of their surplus food program. As a result, the federal government gave $10.8 million to Fisher River First Nation and Freshwater Fish Marketing Corporation to give away all the stock from their freezers to every family in 75 First Nations communities, Manitoba and beyond. With the freezers then empty, FFMC could start buying again, and 3,000 people got back to work in the fishing industry. So if I do nothing else in the rest of my political career, I'm proud that I was able to do that. Now, when it comes to policy and platform, we have an entire section of the Manitoba Liberal Platform dedicated specifically to First Nations issues and reconciliation. But the entire platform is written through the lens of reconciliation. It's about 30 pages long, so I will not share all of it today. But one of the ideas which we want to emphasize and repeat over and over is that what is good for First Nations and what is good for Indigenous people is good for Manitoba. And I will start with what I have often been told is the most important issue, and I agree, which is children, especially children in CFS. It's terrible, it doesn't get enough attention because the CFS system is the root cause of so much trauma and harm in this province. As you all know, there was a 2000 scoop where the number of children being taken from families doubled to 11,000. As a jurisdiction, Manitoba was taking more children away than any other jurisdiction in the world. Not just in Canada, not North America, in the world. And not only did they take children, including on average a newborn a day for years on end, they also took federal benefits. If a Child and Family Service Agency, as you all know, tried to keep the money or give it to children or a foster family, it would be clawed back dollar for dollar. Now, in 2019, after 3 years of continuing this practice, the PC government stopped taking those children's benefits, but instead of making it right, in 2020, they included a clause in their budget that would keep all of that money, and it would cancel all active and future court cases. The money would be kept, and the children would be denied any future possibility of compensation or justice. This was one of the worst, most upsetting things I have ever seen in politics. It was so profoundly morally distressing to watch people that we work with, some of whom seem like nice people, vote to do something so horrifically wrong and morally bankrupt. At the time, the Families Minister was Heather Stephenson. We have committed to returning those funds. On Wednesday, May 18th, 2022, as you know, the Manitoba Court of Queen's Bench delivered a critically important ruling that between 2006 and 2019, the Manitoba government violated the rights of those children who had been taken from their families. And the way they violated those rights should be a national and international scandal. And the fact that it is being ignored means that we are continuing to deny justice to First Nations and especially to those children. And I have to say, it's difficult to talk about this as a political issue because it shouldn't be a football. These children need to be respected. But for all those children out there who feel they've been abandoned or mistreated, They should know that there are people out there who care for them and who want them to be safe. And currently AMC is suing the province, and rightly so. But instead of spending money on lawsuits, we commit to returning that money to the children, negotiating a full settlement, as well as extra compensation. The damage from CFS is almost incalculable. Over half of the people who are homeless on the streets of Winnipeg were in CFS, basically stranded by the Manitoba government that took them in the first place. We know that children in CFS are targeted by criminal predators for trafficking and sexual exploitation. And I have said, ever since I ran for leadership in 2017, that this issue, addressing the issue of First Nations and Indigenous children in CFS, is the most important moral and political issue we face as a province, because all those children deserve a home, a voice, and a future. We will also commit to working with communities to support families, because our goal should be to try to reduce CFS and to reassure anyone who works in that system. If you're working your way out of a job, we'll find you another one. Now, we were also committed to funding the search for the Prairie Green landfill, as well as funding further cold case investigations. After we announced our support for funding the search at Prairie Green, we were contacted by a family who lost a loved one almost 50 years ago. There are 66 cold cases in Manitoba, so we will also take those cases and have them investigated by an outside prosecution service to make sure that nothing has been left behind. And again, when it comes to searching for folks in Prairie Green, we need to remember that the real and only victims here are the dead and the heartbroken family and loved ones they left behind. And that as Manitobans, we should all be united in grief with them. This should never have become an issue of political disagreement. In Ontario, where similar searches were performed by the OPP, there was no political discussion because the police just have a budget for investigations. The Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs presented consistent facts and evidence that the search can be done safely, legally, and that it can succeed. They talked to experts who successfully recovered bodies and helped identify people through their personal belongings. And again, I have incredible respect for Grand Chief Merrick, Regional Chief Woodhouse, and Chief Kyra Wilson. They deserve to be taken seriously because all they are asking for is justice. They are asking for a criminal investigation based on evidence in the law. You are in the right in every way, legally and morally. And every explanation offered up by the PC government has just been spin. The Premier said it was not provincial jurisdiction, and that's not true. The Premier said they would not that it would somehow interfere with the court process. That's not true either. The Premier and Justice Minister said it couldn't be done safely, and that's not true. So it's really clear which side we need to be on. This is really just a matter of siding with the victims and their families and communities who are in the right. I don't understand what kind of conservative has this kind of contempt for victims of crime and tragedy. And it is also a matter of trust and confidence in the justice system. We need to make sure that people can trust and count on the justice system to deliver justice. And First Nations and Indigenous people have very good reasons to be skeptical. We have to make sure that we are rebuilding that confidence and rebuilding that trust, and that will only happen with an investigation. The other is that we want to divert and reduce the number of people who are being imprisoned. When it comes to justice, we want alternatives to incarceration that will put people on a better path. For example, there are no halfway houses in Manitoba. So we spoke to Native Clan. One of the other reasons people are homeless in Manitoba is because they're discharged from jail with nothing straight onto the streets. And so they end up being rearrested and the entire process happens again. The number of Indigenous people in our prisons is a national shame. It's absolutely appalling. But by providing provincial funding to halfway houses that divert people away, we can reduce homelessness, we can free up police and justice resources, and there are incredibly successful existing programs, so we will support Native Clan, which has been working for over 50 years with federal inmates, and also Clan Mothers Healing Village, which is another program for women. When it comes to homelessness, again, 70% of the people who are homeless in the streets of Winnipeg are Indigenous. Over half were in CFS. We are committed to ending homelessness as an act of reconciliation with a plan for same-day housing. It will take 2 years to get it up and running, but the idea is that nobody should be homeless in Manitoba. Right now, End Homelessness Winnipeg requires you to be homeless for 6 months before you're treated as homeless. That means they will never end homelessness with that standard. That has to stop. We'll also, so that means implementing a program to make sure people are housed with supports, working with a variety of trusted organizations. But the reality is, as we all know, proper housing is lower cost than ERs, hospitals, or remand centers. So those are some of the programs of our platform that we're talking about for what I see as some of it is addressing the harms of the past. The other proposals are really about working together and building. When it comes to economic reconciliation, last week we announced our plan for a Manitoba Business Development Bank. The idea is that it would invest in Manitoba entrepreneurs to build and grow their businesses by buying shares instead of loans. As Manitobans, all First Nations and First Nation individuals living on reserve would be eligible. We want to build up growth and wealth and jobs everywhere in this province from the grassroots up by encouraging people to run their own businesses. And those are all announcements we've previously made. We're also making some brand new announcements today from our platform. So I'm announcing for the first time that if elected, Manitoba Liberals will create an Indigenous Secretariat with the province of Manitoba with First Nations as members, so that government can engage on a continuous basis of consultation and partnership in order to address and resolve issues like the implementation of UNDRIP in Manitoba, treaty land entitlements, revenue sharing, and reforms in justice, education, CFS, and more. It's not a secretariat where you'll get a call once in a time, because we've heard so many problems, especially under the PCs, with a complete lack of consultation on projects like Lake St. Martin and on resource projects. It has got to stop. You are all Manitobans. You deserve a seat at the table. And this is a way of making sure you have a seat at the table to provide continuous input into the changes and reforms we need at the province of Manitoba. Also, for the first time, Manitoba Liberals will return birth services to the north. I know from speaking with First Nations leadership, as well as medical personnel, there are too many communities in Manitoba where there has not been a birth in decades. The current standard of care for birth is to fly expectant moms to sit in a hotel in Winnipeg, cut off from the supports of family and community, often vulnerable. I was told by a doctor that the current standard of care, that doing this is leading directly to birth alerts or the seizure of newborns. That tells you something about how broken our system is. So a Manitoba Liberal government will work in partnership with the federal government to restore birth services and prenatal care to First Nations communities so expectant mothers do not have to fly to Winnipeg for care. In addition, we would establish a birth center and dialysis unit in the community of Cross Lake. So instead of spending money on flights and hotels, we spend that money on providing care and safe delivery, including a program to train Indigenous midwives and doulas to ensure that there are safe and supported births in the north. Now in healthcare, we've already committed to the creation of a new faculty of rural and northern family medicine in Brandon, so that people who want to work in rural and northern Manitoba can train there. And finally, our last new announcement, which is committing to long-term compensation and recovery for hydro-affected communities. It's no secret that First Nations communities have often faced incredible destruction to their environment, communities, and local economies due to the actions of previous provincial governments. The same hydro projects that power Manitoba's economy and generate billions in revenue are often built on First Nations lands, which had few restrictions, no permits, and little to no consultation with affected communities. Healthy fisheries were destroyed, undermining self-sufficiency, jobs, and community prosperity for areas like Cross Lake, South Indian Lake, and Seguin. As the owners of hydro, this is the Manitoba government's responsibility. We will create a long-term fund to address the costs and damage created by hydro projects, restore habitats, repair environmental damage, and we will commit a portion of the Manitoba government's income stream from Manitoba Hydro to this fund each year. Fortunately, that sums up our commitments, because I'm clearly out of time. But thank you so much, and I look forward to taking any of your questions. Like this, okay.
Thank you very much to all of you. Now, I know that there are some of you who want to ask questions, and we want to provide you with that opportunity without taking up a whole lot of time, respecting the host community's need to prepare the hall for the dinner for this evening. So questions, please. Microphone number 23.
Good afternoon.
Identify yourself, please.
Hubert Watt, God's Lake First Nation. My question is that our community in God's Lake is in a crisis with illegal drugs. And there's only one way in and out. It's by air, by plane. Can you bring back the searching or the inspection of baggage and freight at isolated communities? That's how it's coming in. It's having an impact on crime. Like crime is getting up there. Mental health issues, it's increasing. Deaths are increasing due to suicides. What will you do to bring back the inspection of baggage and cargo of isolated First Nations that are only accessible by air? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there somebody that wants to provide a quick response? Yes? Okay.
Check. Yes, we will, at provincial facilities and on the provincial areas, work with you to bring that back. Today in Winnipeg, I gave a speech about crime, and I would like to give you a short version of it, because I think it's relevant to your question. Heather Stephenson and the PCs want this election to be about crime. But ask yourself why that is. Crime is worse in this province and worse in your communities than it was when they took office 7 years ago. So why is it that they want to talk about crime? It's because it's not about crime. It's about them blowing on a dog whistle and trying to divide Manitobans between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. And so I think what we have to do is we have to come together. We have to come together to confront these problems that you're giving voice to here today, across all communities, including First Nations. And what I mean by that is that one of the things that gets lost in this dog whistle approach that the Conservatives are trying to take is a fundamental truth, which is that way too often in this province, First Nations people are the victims of crime. And in our communities, women, girls, Two-Spirit people want to be free from violence. Our elders want to be free from having their medication and their money stolen. And every single one of us in every one of our communities wants an end to this damn drug epidemic, which is breaking our families apart and robbing us of our loved ones. And the fundamental disagreement that I have with the PCs on this issue is that they've been hard on the people with addictions, but soft on the drug traffickers. They've been hard on the people with addictions, and they forced them into bus shacks, they forced them under bridges, they forced them into tents. Meanwhile, what have the PCs ever said about drug trafficking? People bringing drugs into your community? Absolutely nothing. So we'll take the opposite approach. If you bring drugs into our communities, you deserve to face the consequences. And if you are somebody living in the community with addictions, then one, you deserve to stay alive. And two, you deserve to have a real shot at recovery. I'm very lucky in my life, through culture, community, family, and yes, the justice system, to have been given a second chance. And I believe that I'm making good on that second chance. But I want that for all of us. I want that for all the young people who are struggling with pills and with drugs and all these other issues that are out there. And so we have to have a different approach at the provincial level, and you have our commitment that we'll work with you to bring that about, both in the local level, but also province-wide, so that we can get things back on track and start to save some lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, microphone number 31, please.
Do I get to?
I'm sorry.
Was there somebody before me?
Oh, okay, and then number 4, and then who else? And you want to respond yet? Okay, quickly. Yeah, quick.
No, just to be very quick. Sorry about that. Yes. Look, it is a huge problem because there is no plan to crack down on illicit drugs. We know right now that there are storefronts in Winnipeg that are operating that sell just about anything. They are storefronts. They are actual shops. So we have planned a number. One is an anti-gang plan, but the other is to crack down on the people who are making all the money from this. But to your point, yes, we can increase inspections. The other important thing is to make sure that we are dealing with prevention. That one of the best things we can do to keep kids from using is to make sure that they have recreation programs or jobs. And we have plans for both of those across Manitoba, including on First Nations.
Okay, microphone number 31.
I just want to say, when drug dealers get caught for trafficking, selling drugs, I'd like to see the justice system change for harsher penalties for drug dealers. I'm Chief Prince from Sandy Bay, Ojibwe First Nation, and we have a huge drug problem in Sandy Bay, and drug dealers get caught, they get taken in, and they're released within the next couple days, back to doing what they were doing before. A lot of these guys don't know any other life but to sell drugs, you know, but I'd like that to change in the justice system, that there's harsher penalties for drug dealers. Miigwech.
Response, yes.
Yes, thank you, Chief Prince. And I know some of your community members who used to be in the problem and have been able to turn things around through culture and through family, and I think that's something we really need to look at. I support stronger bail measures, which is what you're talking about, bail that keeps people safe in communities. But I also want to highlight one of the problems with the PC's plan that they're trying to articulate on crime is, let's say they do actually get these people into the justice system, what's going to happen once they get to that facility? Right now, these institutions in Manitoba are gangster university. You go in as a small-time offender with an addiction, and you come out a hardened criminal who's pledged allegiance to a gang. And then we send you back to the reserve that you came from. That has to stop. We need to look at bail, yes, but we also have to look at the justice system. And so if we do, yes, we do need to take people who are doing bad things off the streets, but that's only the first step. When the person's in the system there, we have to teach them how to live a better life. And specifically, we have to teach them the value of hard work and the benefits of having a good job. And so, yes to bail, but also we have to look at the justice system and the way we're delivering that as well, which I think would support what you're asking for in terms of the community level. Miigwech.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, I think one of the issues which people don't recognize is that, generally speaking, or the PCs pretend not to recognize, is they have completely underfunded our justice system for the entire time that they've been in office. So for 7 years straight, every municipality in Manitoba had its funding frozen. So that includes police budgets, but they also basically froze the entire justice system. 25 Crown attorneys quit in the last 2 or 3 years. The PCs are boasting that they've hired 25 new Crown attorneys because they just replaced the people they lost. We don't actually have the capacity right now in the system to make sure it works. So we need to make sure that, and we need to make sure that there's a place for people to go. One of the problems, there was recently a conference and they said it's not so much the federal bail measures, it's the fact that there's nothing in place in Manitoba. And I do say that one of the things that we talked about, the importance of having halfway houses, so that after someone is arrested, charged, and serves their time, that you have an opportunity to divert them away. Because right now, The Manitoba government is just putting people right back on the streets. They offend, they go back in, and they offend. It's a colossal cost. We need to do what we can to reduce the number of people in jail and prevent crimes in the first place. Some of that is through community programming and sort of strengthening communities so that people are more resistant and they're not as interested. It's basically taking away the demand. But the other is that we need to make sure that we have proper funding for police, especially actually for First Nations policing, which needs to be expanded in Manitoba because they've been extraordinarily effective, as people have said. There's never been a shooting involved with First Nations police. So we need to make sure that we have community policing that exists across Manitoba.
Thank you very much. I have a number of microphones or number of people who have put up their hands. So there's number 4, 17, 30, 32, and number 26.
Derek Nevenak, Chief of the Minnegosa Anishinaabe. Gambling and lottery schemes are illegal in Canada, but for an exemption in Section 207 of the Criminal Code, which allows provinces to regulate and create law around gaming. The province of Manitoba, under both the NDP and the PC, have created a conflict of interest by regulating gaming, but also profiting big time from the establishment of gaming sites across the province. And this has often been done to the exclusion of our full participation in the process, as evidenced by, I think we now have 2 casinos which are broke or near broke, not making money. I think that what I'd like to ask is whether or not there's a commitment from the NDP or the Liberals to support the extension of that exemption in Section 207 to Indigenous governments, First Nation governments who have the right and have always had the inherent right to create our own regulatory environment when it comes to gambling and lottery schemes, something that's been there as an inherent right since day one, but has been constructively prevented, through legal mechanisms by, the province of Manitoba and other jurisdictions as well across Canada, provincially have interfered in the exercise of the inherent right. The province has created multiple years, decades actually, of great windfalls in gaming because they've worked hard to exclude us from full participation. So what I'm asking for from the candidates is whether or not they would support the Section 207 exemption extending to First Nations communities in the establishment of our own regulatory and gaming environments in our communities and beyond. Miigwech.
Check. Yes, we'll work with you on that. I can tell you that right now on the Board of Liquor and Lotteries, there are board members who want to facilitate moving some of the VLTs that are currently approved in the province to urban reserves as one example, but they're getting blocked at the political level. So we'll work with Liquor and Lotteries on that. And just to add to the discussion, because if you talk to the casino tribes in the States, they're very worried about the impact that online gaming is going to have to them. So let's add online gaming to the discussion. Most people in the room are probably familiar with the ads you see when you watch sports today, DraftKings and whatever Connor McDavid and Wayne Gretzky are selling in terms of gambling apps. But that's where the gaming industry is heading. So let's have a discussion about how we can work together on that too, because there is a platform here in Manitoba, playnow.com. The money stays in the province, so let's have that conversation about how that can be used to benefit communities.
Yeah, thank you. That would be a perfect example of something that we would discuss at an Indigenous Secretariat to work that out. Absolutely, we'd consider it. The one thing I have to say is that I'm not a huge fan of gambling because I actually think that one of the things we'd like to see through our Manitoba Business Development Bank is to make sure that people have other different kinds of economic opportunities and ways of making money. Because I think that there is huge potential across First Nations, but absolutely this is something that we need to discuss to make sure that we're recognizing First Nation sovereignty.
Thank you. Number 17.
Miigwech. Thank you for coming out, listening to us. We have a lot of concerns and we have a hell of a lot more. But I'll just run one by you. Every time we have a federal election in our communities, they set up polls, election polls. When we have a provincial election, there's nothing. for our community members on reserve. At least mine, anyway. But under Section 88 of the Indian Act gives the provinces the right to come into our communities. And it seems like they only have that right when they want to apprehend kids or arrest somebody with a tripart policing agreement. So that is one of my questions. And then the other question that I had, but Chief Nipinak brought it up, was about gaming. This online gaming, you know, we get a little bit of a dividends if any of our 5 casinos make money. But majority of the time, they don't, ever since online gaming came about. So with that being said, I wouldn't mind our communities getting a piece of the pie as well. You know, it's a lot of our, you go into McPhillips, I would say anywhere from 60 to 80% of the personnel or people you see playing there are First Nations. You see it all over here in Manitoba. You even see it at some VLTs. You know, if you allow smoking, it'll be full of First Nations. But the other thing, I would like you to look into that. Another thing I would like you to look into was, if at all possible, to help us, I guess, I should put it that way, once you do get elected, an addiction center. There's nothing in Manitoba. There was 3, I believe, and I think there's one in Gillum. And I seen a flyer somewhere where it states you're going to appoint somebody to that center. It's $26,000 for 30 days, 40 days, and you get nothing back. So why can't us First Nations apply for an addiction center? And when we did, some of us did, got rejected. You know, it's all a one-way street. Let's take from the Indian. We'll keep it here, white man. I ain't racist, by the way. I'm just using that as an example. But that's what's been happening too long, and it's still happening to us poor people. You know, it's not fair. Never been. It'll never will. And I always say to my kids, I said, you know, it's tough to be an Indian. Very tough. You try to survive in the outside world, mingle against the non-treaty people, who try and get along in this world. You get criticized. They try and bring you down. White people. I lived through it. Then you go, to hell with those white people. I'm going to move back to the res. I moved back to the reservation. Oh, I have a new truck. Holy smokes, he's stealing money. That's why I say it's very tough to be an Indian, no matter where you go. So where the hell do you go? That's how us Indian people are. That's how our white neighbors are. Oh, they're getting lots of government grants. Bah, bah, bah. They bring you down to try and succeed. And my last question to you, Mr. Liberal Rep, how come Trudeau left his wife? Thank you.
I had nothing to do with it.
I figured I would say something and make everybody laugh. A lot of times our muscles in our cheeks never get worked enough. Thank you.
No comment. Well, Well, I met your boy who's running horses at Birds Hill Park, and I know you raised him right. He's a hardworking young man. On terms of the polling station, that's something we'll work with you, and everyone around the table will work with you on that before the election. Let's make sure there is a polling station. If there's ever been a concern or a lack of presence from Elections Manitoba, we have a direct line, as do the other parties. We'll be happy to use that to make sure that your citizens have the right to vote on election day. And of course, off-reserve members as well of your communities. And yeah, on the online gaming piece, that's what I'm talking about, right? That's where that industry is headed. So that's got to be part of the conversation there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We are concerned about online gaming. And if you're from Wayway, you're from Wayway? My family has had land near Olha for about near Rossburn for 40 years. So I'm actually aware of all the issues you're talking about, including the people who are frankly racist and who feel that, you know, whenever Indigenous people get anything, that they're being left out. When one of the things I've always said is that treating people equally is not special treatment, right? And even when it comes to ideas around affirmative action is about dismantling the affirmative action plan that white people have had for a very long time. So, and so some of it is education, some of it is working together. But yeah, we're absolutely committed to, and again, to addressing, to make sure that everybody has that right to vote, because it's absolutely critical. The difference First Nations could make, First Nations can completely have the capacity to change the face of this province with their vote. And that is incredibly important. So,
thank you. Before we move on to the next speaker, next microphone, Chiefs, I would ask, and all the staff, you take everything with you as soon as we adjourn, because the staff are here starting to get ready to get set up for dinner. So make sure you take everything with you. IT staff will take the printers. Okay, now we have 30, 32, 26, and Chief Ducharme, are you number 9? 9, 10, and 12 yet to go. And then leaders, if you're available, there is a white tent across the way by the powwow arbor where there is a meet and greet. And you're welcome to go and attend. The young athletes that are there, as well as the leadership that are going to be there. So if you can go over, that would be really appreciated once we get done here. Are you available to go over? It's 3:17. We were supposed to be out of here at 3, so we're kind of rolling along here. So, number 30. Yeah. Chief Zastry.
29.
Oh, 29, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon, Wab and Dougal. I just got a couple questions here, quick ones here. Are you gonna do 100% search for our ladies when you guys get in, and no hee-hawing about the money? We need our women to be home with us, the ones that are missing them. Number 2 question is policing in our community. We have policing all over in our rural areas that when the time they get to the crime, somebody's either dead or they're gone someplace else. For drug dealers, I'm talking about. We need our own policing in our own communities. We were meeting with some Aboriginal policing a few months ago at Long Plains. We were working with them, but I never heard nothing back on them. So I'm kind of concerned about that, because with the drug, what's happening with our people right now, there's so many bad drugs coming in our community. Our kids are falling into that trap and they're getting hurt on that. So we have to do something about that right away. And my third one is, you guys are a provincial government, we're federal. But you guys seem to have a lot of power when it comes to the Métis Federation and giving them the rights to all our lands and occupying a lot of stuff that we want to build businesses and we have to go through them before we do anything. The Métis Federation doesn't have no treaty rights like us. But it seems that the provincial and the federal government are giving them rights to hold us. It seems like the governments are using them to make us fight, and we can't. We're brothers and sisters. We're all brothers and sisters, the Métis. At one time, we never fought like this, and now we're all fighting on account of the governments. Could you guys do something about it? Thank you.
So on the first one, yes, to a search, 100%. On the second issue, yes, we'll work with whether it's the RCs or whether it's the First Nations police force in terms of making sure that the police presence is better. And let's add paramedics too. We need to improve the wait times in rural for paramedics as well. And on your third question, Métis people have rights. They're in the same section of the Constitution as First Nations people are. The difference is between us and the PCs are trying to do divide and conquer and pit Métis versus First Nations so that they can wash their hands and walk away without ever doing anything. What we'll do, we'll get to work and we'll make sure that things get done, whether it's a local business, whether it's an economic opportunity, whether it's educational opportunity. We'll get to the table, we'll bring people together who need to work together, and we'll deliver for people in all of our communities. Miigwech.
So to the search, absolutely. We committed an initial, I think, $42 million, but that's initial. If the federal government doesn't participate, we would spend the rest. If it goes over that, we would also go over that. It's a question of doing the right thing and making sure this search is done. There's no question of that. As far as policing, there are two things, especially when you talk about people dying. One is actually ensuring that there's better local medical care. As part of our plan, we've talked about creating local clinics, making sure that every Manitoban has a family physician or a nurse practitioner. That includes folks on reserve. We will work with the federal government to make sure that that happens. But the one thing I have to say is that the idea that First Nations are in exclusively federal jurisdiction is often used by the provincial government as a way of denying you services continually. I mean, that's part of the entire basis of Jordan's principle. So we'd like to take a Jordan's principle approach to everything. It's not just limited to children. There shouldn't be an argument about who pays. We should be making sure that we're covering, that everybody is being covered while respecting the independence and sovereignty of First Nations, recognizing that the Manitoba government has an obligation to respect your rights as residents of Manitoba as well, to make sure that we're actually spending equitable amounts on education, healthcare, justice, and also making sure, because there are so many parts of Manitoba where we've basically lost police, to make, we'd particularly like to see more Indigenous policing and investments on that. If it requires provincial funding, we can have provincial funding. I personally don't understand how it is that for years and years, the provincial government can say, and they wash their hands and deny that they have any responsibility of First Nations while they build hydro dams on your territory, while they put mines on your territory, while they share none of the resources and keep all of it. So you're paying for all the risks and pain and cost, and the government gets all the benefit. That is what has to end, because we're all Manitobans at the end of the day. And that is, ending that fundamental division, respecting differences, but ending that division is key to what we have to do to move forward in a good way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we move to microphone number 32, please?
Thank you again for coming out to my community. Just wanted to, some of my more seasoned colleagues have already touched on some items that I wanted to reference in terms of gaming and Section 88 and so on. The current PC government has a reconciliation ministry. From our perspective, there's been a very limited steps forward under that ministry. And some of the concerns that I've had in my first term is in regards to the application of Section 88 and the assumption that the provincial government has laws and regulations that do apply within my community. I face it every day when it comes to the gaming across the street, the gaming within my facility, the gas and tobacco tax and so on that happens within our communities. And again, the province is very good at only coming in and taking, it's very black and white when it comes to taking money from my community. But the opposite of that, healthcare and so on that happens within our community, isn't as black and white. It becomes gray, and then there's this jurisdictional issue. But my question is, and my issue is that we've never had an opportunity to actually sit down and understand what the province believes under Section 88 actually applies within my community. We've also never had a conversation about us saying, well, do we consent to that application? And I think that's the biggest problem that we have here as First Nations people, is that these things are being done unilaterally on other tables that we're not a part of. We never built the provincial government legal system or so on. Same with the federal level. Never been a part of any of that. But yet the application and the impacts of all those things apply here right directly with not only within my community, but also within my territory, my treaty territory. And one of the questions that I had in regards to the provincial parties that we have here is, do you believe that the treaty that we signed in 1871, specifically Treaty 1, actually gave the authority or the ability for these outside entities like the province of Manitoba to have jurisdiction within our communities? And I think that's a big problem for me. You know, when it comes to communities like Long Plain, and again, I'm not speaking on behalf of them, but having to request to move their machines, VLTs, from their one reserve to a new reserve that they've created under the Treaty Land Entitlement process, and they're a sectorial self-governing First Nation under the First Nation Lands Management Act. You know, they went through all those steps, but yet the province still asserts that they have control. And that control has to be approved, and she has to walk through these processes. So it's not only that I want to know is do we believe that actually applies, but what steps are we going to take to move forward? And understanding that this colonial regime, we talk about reconciliation, there's currently a department, there's currently a ministry on Indigenous reconciliation, but yet I haven't seen any sort of action being taken from the issues that we brought forward, not only in my community, I'm sure collectively here, but also having one more issue that I just want to touch on real quick before I move on. Treaty number 1 is probably the most developed territory or area of land within Manitoba. Our rights that the Liberal Party referenced there just now, in terms of, you know, being respected and the province having a responsibility to acknowledging those rights, this whole territory has been managed as if we weren't even here. You take a flight in, you take a drive through, you leave here, take a look left and right all the way through my territory, take a drive all the way around my territory, and it's been developed as if we don't even exist here. So when we talk about resource revenue sharing or resource extraction, here in Treaty 1, a lot of it's already been taken. There's probably little left for us to say, you know, that we can assess, you know, maybe some gravel pits, maybe, you know, we got some sand up the road here, silica sand that they're talking about. But I believe that the new way that we reconcile our relationship here in Treaty 1 is that hunting, fishing, trapping, those types of things, especially the fishing and hunting part, has been totally annihilated. We have no more moose, we have no more large game in our territory. But what we do have in this area, maybe not as much so in our northern communities or the other treaty partner or treaty areas, but what we have is a taxation regime that's within Treaty 1. I can only imagine how many millions and millions of transactions that happen within Treaty 1. But how is it that the province and the provincial government, and maybe under your leadership, that we start to think about the impacts on the uses of these lands and the current uses of these lands, and how the taxation regime should be incorporated to include the treaty benefit going back to our community as contemplated under the treaty when we talk about the Queen or King's benevolence to our First Nations?
On the treaties, my understanding of the treaties is that they are sacred agreements, covenants, that our ancestors entered into to share the land. And in the contemporary context, that means that there's a legal interpretation. But I think First Nations leadership have done a strong job of reminding Canada over the years, and the provinces as well, because the Crown is indivisible, that there's a spirit and intent of the treaties as well. You raised some questions about the Indian Act. Let's work together. I have a chance this year to become the first person in our province's history to become Premier who also has a status card. And so I've been looking at that document that has Wabanakot Canoe is an Indian within the meaning of the Indian Act for my entire life. So let's work together. Let's sort through some of these issues. And you asked the question about how do we work together with the government department and maybe the government bigger picture. I'll say a couple things and then I'll invite my colleague Ian here just to give you some insight into our team. So I said like 1/3 of our team is First Nations people, right? We have 6 First Nations MLA today. 6 First Nations MLAs. We'll elect more if we're successful. We have 3 First Nations women MLAs on our team. And we'll elect more if we're successful in this coming election. We have 2 First Nations MLAs within our caucus who are former chiefs. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the jobs that you all do. I can only imagine what it's like, you know, to have your phone ringing 24/7. But whereas I can only imagine, Ian Bushy, MLA for Kiewitnook, and Eric Redhead, MLA for Thompson, have lived it. And so I think there's going to be a strong basis for collaboration if we're successful in terms of working with you as leaders and our potential next government. So I'll invite Ian to say a couple words just to provide some insight there.
Oh, Miigwech Rob. So Chief, part of your questions were about consultation and consent. And I think from the perspective that I want to say I was on that side of the table, it was something that was very frustrating and something that, and under this PC government is just kind of a box they want to be able to check. You know, if Heather Stephenson was sitting here today, she would say, I consult with AMC on whatever issue you discussed to say, okay, we did this, they're good with it. So that collaboration and that true partnership doesn't exist under the current government that's there. So to be able to have a true consultation process, and right now, the PC government takes that consultation and they have the same definition of consultation and consent. Meaning I've talked with you, so you agree with it. Because we've done our due diligence, we've checked all the boxes in terms of what we're required to do. But when we have, and I mean, they've shuffled that department around a couple different times now, but it's playing and trying to navigate that. And you all seen that when you dealt with ISK, you know, maybe you get a good working relationship with a various department or whatever, and there's a shuffle going on. But from the PC government, that's on purpose. That's on purpose to always kick back those issues. So you're always having that discussion for the first time with a new minister or with whoever they put out to be able to do that. And that's just because that consultation is only one way on their part. They're not wanting to bring that forward and have that true consultation with the communities. When you're talking about gaming, when you're talking about tobacco tax, fuel taxes and things like that, you talk about the revenue generated in your communities and the expansion that you want to do, even just shuffling within your communities, as you mentioned with Long Plains, just wanting to move from one area to the other, or yourself, Chief, just wanting to move across the road. And that inability to be able to do that, again, that's that hindrance on behalf of the government to want you to hold you back. So we absolutely commit to being able to work together on that. Because as Wab mentioned, and it's something I'm very proud of the fact that our caucus currently right now, a third is Indigenous. So we bring those issues forward each and every day. So it may not be something you see in the media every day, but things that we do around our caucus table always have our Indigenous and our First Nation communities at mind and at heart with how we decide to move forward in the province of Manitoba in true partnership, in true collaboration, and again, with true consultation with our First Nation communities. Rich.
Thank you. As far as the reconciliation department goes, I asked questions of Eileen Clark. I asked, has anyone from Hydro met with anybody from MKO? Or why hasn't the CEO of Hydro never met from anyone from MKO? And she said, well, that's in another department now, I don't know. I asked Eileen Clark, why did you vote to keep $338 million for children in CFS? And she did not answer. She basically said, well, these things are now spread throughout the department. It's basically that reconciliation is now part of all these other departments, so that doesn't matter anymore, which is completely wrong. And so part of what we want to do, this is why we would like to create an Indigenous secretariat. And by secretariat, it means that you would actually be there at the table. It doesn't mean the province is there. It's not some consultation board or talking shop. This is the place where you would actually make the decisions, because we would like to implement UNDRIP. So how is it that we're going to, what are the changes we need to make to Manitoba legislation to make sure that that happens? Because the other thing, in speaking with folks from Peguis, there has never been a project in Manitoba that has gone forward and been blocked for environmental reasons, ever. So it happens. I mean, there are so many processes in Manitoba where it basically is just window dressing, that they're pretending something's going on, but at the end of the day, there's a rubber stamp, and that shouldn't happen. The power you need to have is the power to say no, and we want to make sure that's what the power of consent is, and we want to make sure you have that. And so part of that is making sure that you're around the table, making sure that, and that we are actively making these changes to Manitoba legislation. The one thing about treaties, I'm not an expert in this, and actually I know that Chief Neepanak has done incredible work talking about the treaties going back to the 1700s. The one thing I would say is that, well, two things. One is that in Manitoba, we are also part of the Crown, right? This is the thing about it, is there's the top crown, which is the crown of the federal government, but then each of us, we actually literally, we have a speech from the throne in Manitoba, is that Manitoba is a sub-government that still kind of represents the Crown. But the other is that in law, there's a sense that the Crown is the people. It's not embodied in a single person. It's not embodied in the king. And what we have in Canada is we have people of the land and the people of the treaties, and then we have the people of the Crown. And we have to figure out a way to get of actually properly working together so that it's sharing, because at this point, as many of you have said, it's about the Crown taking and taking and taking and never giving back. And part of that is to recognize, and this is partly from, I met with an elder in Brandon, Frank Tacan Sr., and he said, yes, the whole point is you can't keep taking and taking and taking, you have to give back. And that is part of what we need to do, both in terms of the environment, both in terms of our relationship with First Nations, and making sure that that's part of justice and doing the right thing and reconciliation. That in my view. So those are, and again, those are things we want to make sure that it's not just a consultation, it's not an email, it's not a visit at a coffee shop, because I've heard that all of those things are considered consultation. And that consultation doesn't mean that, okay, now that we've talked to them, we can do whatever we want. That's unacceptable. We can't be doing that anymore. Yeah. So, and we want to change and make sure those things, because I will say, the other thing about it, that is actually one of the things that can help make things better for all First Nations people and all of Manitoba. Because right now, there's an expectation, it has been set up, the system has been set up so that you're exploitable. That is unacceptable. That has to change. So thank you.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, we have 5 more requests to pose questions to the leadership. I would like to ask that leaders pose their questions, and if you could jot them down, and then you'll have an opportunity to answer all of them together. We'll give 2 minutes for each response, because we are now at 3:37. Okay, number 27, Chief Wilford McKay. Or 26.
Chief McKay, Rolling River, Anishinaabe. I got 3 things. I'll make it short. Mental health issues. How are you going to look at this? You know, I see it as becoming a pandemic in the near future. So how are your parties going to look at this issue? Right now, we have people with severe problems in our communities that have no place to go. They wander around in our communities, and at night, you know, because of the problems they're having, schizo, you know. There's no institutions out there to help our people regarding these issues. And Clear Sky mentioned it briefly, you know. What's happening right now is these people, when they do something wrong, the RCMP will come and get them if you force them to come and get them, and then they'll take them to get assessed, and they'll stay at the facility for a couple of days and they're let go again. It's just a vicious cycle. Okay, that's so you know, we have to do something about this. We talked about health issues earlier before you guys got here, and I don't think anything was mentioned on mental health unless I fell asleep. Huh? Okay. The other issue is an RTA. How are your parties going to look at the Natural Resources Transfer Act? illegal document. How are you going to work with the First Nations? And the third thing is our hunting and fishing treaty right. We're still being harassed by RCMP, we're still being harassed by conservation officers. What are we going to do about that? But in the meantime, our physicians are telling the First Nations, you have to go back to your, you know, the way you ate before. You have to go back as wildlife. That's what the physicians are telling our First Nation members. And when we try to do that, these officers jump us right away. They jump out of the bush. Huh? Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, microphone number number 9, Chief Ducharme.
Good afternoon, and thank you for, showing your presence here. I do have a question to the party regarding the Manitoba Hydro. I guess dams directly, and also I did hear mention of, compensation long-term. But I think the priority on this will be, will your party be open to renegotiating the Manitoba Hydro Act with consultations of First Nation? And I think, when we consider that, there's a lot of in-depth issues that need to be looked at, as our community is one of the very destruction that has taken place. When you take the resource power from a community, you have also taken the livelihood of our people. And, the environment totally damaged. And I acknowledge for, WAP Canoe for coming to our community to actually see the site that we live every day in our lives. And, when you look at a community that's been totally destroyed from their economy, everything in life has gone. Your culture, your traditional ways has been impacted through the destruction. And we are in the era of reconciliation. I think, for communities like ours, there needs to be that. There has to be a lot done in our community. You can't rebuild an environment. It's there forever. And one of the biggest things that we are often, looking at is there a future for our younger generations here? With nothing left on our lands and waters, there is a need for that compensation. And right now we are actually going to be taking the Manitoba Hydro to court. But that doesn't bring back of what we lost. I think, going back to looking at this package and, the act, we don't want in the future to see other nations have to face up with this. And I think, hydro dams should not be built in the future. Egusane.
Thank you, Chief Ducharme. Number 10, Chief Hart.
Chief Hart, Bunwanvi Cree Nation. Very simply, just goes back to what I always ask provincial government leaders is when are we going to get a restart on the construction of the Northeast all-weather road up into our communities of God's River, God's Lake. It's vitally needed. We were working towards a 2030 all-season road back when the previous NDP government was there. And, I'm hoping that there is going to be a commitment to restart this work because it's vitally needed. The cost of living in our communities, isolated communities, is just through the roof. The ticket prices on the airlines to come to Winnipeg is $500 a person, so you can't bring your family. If you're a young family, you can't bring them out for a vacation or anything like that type of thing, because it's going to cost you $5,000 or $6,000 just to get them to Winnipeg. Never mind Thompson. And I don't know, there's something about having year-round access that does wonders for one's mental health. You don't seem as isolated. When we do have a winter road, spirits actually lift because you can actually go visit other communities, take your kids out for activities that, in sports trips, field trips, that type of stuff, but which is closed to you in the summer because of the high cost of the airlines. And I don't know, the last 7 years, the project was completely shelved. But, I'd love to see a winter road, an all-season road, sooner rather than later, because I think it benefits our communities, so that we can enjoy a better standard of living. And it's vitally needed. I think that that's the one major topic that most of the members of my community would like to see, because they know the benefits of an all-weather road in terms of groceries, trips, all that type of stuff. And I guess I'm just trying to see where does that fit in the plans of the leaders for communities such as mine, Bambambi, and God's Lake and God's River, because we really want this.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 12, Chief Mitchell.
Good afternoon, Chief Mitchell. Chief Hart stole my show. And I echo what he just said, but my question is regarding the CBAs, Community Benefit Agreements that were signed by the government. I'm not talking about a party platform. I'm talking about the provincial government's agenda to complete and honor the CBAs. I want to invite you to my community. Make sure you pick a day when the weather is bad, because you're going to land on my too short for mistakes airstrip. We have been battling this issue for like 40 years already, trying to relocate our airstrip because it's limited as to what can land on our strip. Heaven forbid if you get sick when you're up there, because it'll take at least 4 or 5 hours to get you out. You'll be dead by that time. Not to laugh about it, but that's how serious it is in our community. A poor transportation network. The Palmer River, you could fly to Vancouver or Toronto for that price, but those are the things that we live with, and our people live in poverty. So I want to know what both governments have on their agenda to address the all-weather road to Palmer River and to the Island Lake communities, and also the CBAs. Please.
Thank you, Chief Mitchell. Number 30, Chief Wilson.
So mine's not a comment. This is more of a question. Sorry, mine is a comment, not a question. So just looking at the popularity vote projections right now in Manitoba, and this comment is for anybody in the room and anybody that is watching online, and this is not meant to be
be disrespectful in any way to anybody here. But when you look at the popularity vote projection right now, what you see is that the NDP have a 43% popularity vote, the PCs have a 39% popularity vote, and Liberals have a 13% popularity vote. And that's projections within Manitoba when we talk about the different parties that we currently see in this province. So right now, what you're seeing is two different parties that are going head to head right now in this provincial election, and that is the NDP and that is the PCs. And so, unfortunately right now, you know, Liberals are gaining some momentum in the province, but they're not quite there yet. And so when we look at the popularity vote projections, NDP and PCs are head-to-head, and we actually have to think about how are we going to affect that change in this province of Manitoba. We do not want to see a conservative government in the legislature here in the province of Manitoba again. All these issues that we're talking about, these are issues that are not being addressed by the PCs, and we need to get them out of office. And the only way by doing that is bringing this gentleman here into office. And for me right now, you know, if we're talking about voting and splitting the votes between whether it's NDP or Liberal, it would make sense to be putting our vote towards a party that has projection for 43% popularity vote in Manitoba. This is an opportunity for change. I think as communities, as Indigenous populations, whether you're in urban areas or rural, we have an opportunity for change right now. So I believe as leadership we need to try to support all of our membership, whether that's on reserve or off reserve, to get to the polls to affect that change. And right now, that's what we are talking about, is we are looking at two different parties in this province, the NDP and the PCs. They are going head to head right now in the projections for popularity. We don't want the PCs in. We need to put our vote where it matters, and I don't mean any disrespect. I do appreciate all the work that you're doing, I just want to say that we have to put our vote towards getting a new government in, and that's essentially what we need to do here. Because when I talk to the provincial government right now about two of our First Nations women in the landfill and they're not willing to do it, what that tells me is that the PCs do not care about our women and just human beings in general. So to me, we have to do whatever we can to get the PCs out, and that's what my goal is going to be moving forward until we get to the election day. So those are my comments, and I just want to say miigwech for listening. Thank you.
Microphone number 24, Chief Yellowback.
Good afternoon. Just a small comment here. Anyway, regarding Chief Wilson's projections there's no mention of the Green Party projections. But anyway, in all seriousness there, I'd like to welcome all the party leaders that are here, and it's disappointing that the Premier has not elected to participate in this. But at the same time, I'd like to put it on record that my 2CP fully supports Chief Wilson and her community to have the landfill searched. And it's great to hear that the leaders have made that commitment if elected. So I've been asking them now. And one of the things too also that we have in our community is that we have airlines that services our communities, and we're a remote community. And one of the challenging parts to that, as Chief Watt mentioned, was the drugs that are, smuggled in our community. But one of the things that happened in our community last Friday, and our First Nation safety officers so that there was an individual that traveled on an airline that operates out of St. Andrews Airport. And once so that we were alerted that this man there arrived in our community, and he was on our reserve, they proceeded to have a search on him, his bags, and on the person as well. And there, lo and behold, a sawed-off shotgun was found, loaded even, a concealed weapon. And it's hard to fathom how the heck is that concealed weapon managed to pass through the what is airline to have this passenger loaded with a concealed weapon. Because we need to have effective mechanisms in place of screening passengers. Maybe have a screen like you see there at the Winnipeg Airport, the terminal. To have a better secure system in place. Because this individual compromised the safety of the passengers, including the crew on that flight. And when you talk about what happened in 9/11. It's still surprising. There's lack of mechanisms in place in terms of security-wise. This shouldn't be happening. When you're when we lived that 9/11, what happened? Over 3,000 people were lost in one morning. I think that's something that whoever forms government after the election, they have to make that a priority to ensure that all airlines that they operate out of from, there has to be an effective security system in place. And we're meeting with this airline on Friday afternoon. And this is because when we sent our letters out to them Friday afternoon, we suspended their scheduled flights to our community. And they woke up, and they're lo and behold, they're implementing the security measures. So I think that's one of the things that I need to hear a commitment from the party leaders.
Thank you.
And that I commend Wapkanu Dugalamont for being here. And I'd like to ask our MLA as well to be visible in our communities. I haven't seen you in our community for the last 4 years. I just recently was aware that you are our MLA. So you need to be present in our community. Like your counterpart there at a federal level, she comes in at least twice a year to our community to hear our issues. You should be doing the same thing. Because like I've always said, I don't want the provincial government coming to our community every 4 years. That's the only time that we are considered citizens of Manitoba. And between that time, we are considered federal jurisdiction. So I want to see you there, if you're successful there. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite, if you would like to provide a short response to the questions that have been raised, just so that the chiefs that have raised the questions have a response from you. And then we are going to call an end, because we need to get out of here for the sake of the dinner. But also, please remember, you can go across the road to that white tent and have further conversations. In trying to accommodate everybody, and chiefs, I want to remind you that we have a full agenda tomorrow, and there are 10 resolutions currently that are coming forward. All right? Chief Zastry. Thank you very much, Chief. Okay, go ahead.
All right, Miigwech and Niosane, and Opida, to everyone for your questions. In order to provide a concise answer, a short answer, something quick, what I will simply point to is 2016, when I first was elected as an MLA, I got the NDP, this is before I was a leader, I got the NDP to pass the UN Declaration as the Rights of Indigenous People as the official framework for engaging with First Nations and Métis and Inuit people in the party. And that's what we've been using ever since. And now as leader, if we're selected to lead the next provincial government, what we will do is we will ask the civil service how are you going to change your practices in the civil service to comply with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples? The reason why I think this is significant and appropriate in terms of responding to the questions that are asked is because the UN Declaration talks about having the rights to health, including mental health. It talks about having a say in resource development, natural resources, including hydroelectric development. And to make a more pointed comment, I think Manitoba Hydro needs a very big change in direction at the senior levels. And we would pursue that, beginning with who's sitting on the board. I also know that the UN Declaration, when we're talking about planning for development in your traditional lands, I would interpret that as applying to infrastructure. And so I know that there's questions on the all-weather roads, and I think that there are going to be many, many communities who want to pursue opportunities like that. And so we need to work together to prioritize and specifically, as I said in my opening comments, to put local people to work. When we build roads, I don't just want to benefit people from other provinces. I want people in your communities, in our communities, to benefit from those construction projects. So, the UN Declaration, setting a tone with the civil service that that's what they're going to be tasked with looking at. And so I just want to close by saying I really sincerely appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak to you. When I was a kid, I was a little kid sitting under the table over there in Chiefs meetings like this one, because my dad was a chief and my mom was political staff. And so I grew up in this sort of environment on the periphery. And so to be here at the adult table with you today is a high honor. And I feel very humbled to be welcomed in. And I really appreciate you all for your time. I sincerely appreciate Chief Wilson for making the comments that she did. And I would say that our team has worked very hard. And Manitobans are smart. When Manitobans are asked by pollsters and they tell them that they are taking our team seriously as forming the next government, to me, that is a sincere responsibility. It's a responsibility on our team to deliver. We still have to have the mentality that we're one vote behind. And so over the next 50 days, we're going to travel the province and we're going to make the case for Manitobans that we want better. And we want a provincial government that can make life better together here in Manitoba. But what I'll say in a humble way is that it's not just about the polls. It's also about our team. You can't show up and appoint a cabinet with people who don't have experience. Our team has experience. We have a number of MLAs with a ton of So I say it with humility, but I say it with a tone of seriousness as well, that our team has been putting in the work for many years now to be in a position to replace the current government. Replace the flaws that we've been seeing over these past number of years, past 7 years that the PCs have been in, and bring about a new approach, and one that reflects better where the people of Manitoba are at today. So as I stated at the outset, I'll repeat again here, I'm asking for your support this year. And you think about some of the communities that you have influence in, Brandon, Selkirk, Dauphin, Portage, Thompson, and so on down the list. I'm asking for your support in your home communities, but also I'm asking for your support in reaching out to your off-reserve community members as well. So with that, a sincere thank you. Miigwech bezindaayik minaandikit.
Just a quick comment to also get back to some of the questions that were raised. All-weather road, which would be Chief Hart, Chief Mitchell, also to the Gauze communities as well as the Isle Lake communities. Is it something that we need to collaboratively work together on? I mean, we talk about, and I mean, St. Teresa's Point being one, Poplar River being another. There was things in place already. There was already discussions being placed, and it just 6 years ago just stopped. PC government just totally stopped everything, stopped those communications, stopped that discussion. So that's a discussion that we need to have, not only provincially, but also federally with everybody at the table. With this PC government constantly, day in, day out, picks fights on the federal government, will bounce Indigenous issues back and forth between their responsibility, federal versus provincial, in the hopes that nothing ever gets done, that nothing ever gets accomplished. Those discussions never happen. So those are things that we need to have. But we also can't just do it on the bare minimum. And then I look over at Chief Hamilton and Blood Bay and Chief McKay in Barons River, who over these past decade did get a road, but at the same time, I would say got the bare minimum of road and got no infrastructure to be able to maintain that. So those are discussions that we need to have on a regular basis to see what's best for all of us and how can we best get this done rather than picking fights and trying to say it's not our responsibility. So we need to have those discussions and open them up so we have economic benefit for all of us. But as Wab mentioned, it's not just about getting the job done, it's also being able to train and have our people in those jobs and in those positions. Not have somebody just come in and do the work and be gone. As Chief Mitchell had mentioned about CBAs as well as joint venture agreements, so that not just a bare minimum, so we get 51% just to say there's First Nation ownership. There's actually true partnership with First Nation communities and Indigenous communities all along in whatever aspect it may be. And Chief Yellowback, I apologize. COVID, scheduling, cancellations, all that aside, that's no excuse. I will do better to be in your community. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just try to get through all those things quickly. In terms of mental health issues, we've previously committed to making sure that mental health care would be covered under Medicare. We would work with the federal government to make sure that there are psychological services available in First Nations. When it comes to hunting and fishing, we know that Manitoba conservation has been absolutely terrible. We filed a complaint with the Ombudsman because there were individuals working within Manitoba conservation who are writing abusive emails and who are clearly having policies that disadvantaged Indigenous fishers across Lake Winnipeg. The quota buyouts were much more in the southern basin than they were in the north. It's appalling. And there were outright abusive emails. We filed a complaint, and it's because, quite frankly, there are a lot of people from the Manitoba Wildlife Federation who've been involved in running that department. And they've been explicit in the fact that they do not believe in treaty hunting rights. When it comes to Manitoba Hydro, absolutely, we'd be willing to reopen the Manitoba Hydro Act. We held a press conference at the South Indian Lake pleading with the conservation minister at the time not to renew the license, which they did anyway. When it comes to roads and CBAs, absolutely, that's something we would consider. And I'll address, I have a great deal of respect for Chief Wilson. I will respect the comment about polls. I was asked here today to present a platform, and I did. I don't know that I heard any specifics from anyone else at all. So, and part of this is that the reality is that if we're looking for change, and I'll say about polls, I'll give you an example, but polls are something that needs to change. There's a massive undecided vote out there. In the last election, more people stayed home and did not vote at all than voted for the PCs and the NDP combined. And in 2015, at the beginning of a federal election, we decided to support, I worked on a campaign for Robert Falcon-Ouellette to run in Winnipeg Centre. No one thought we could possibly win. It had been held by the NDP for 17 years straight, by Pat Martin, who was a fixture. And initially, Robert Falcon-Ouellette was polling at 15%. By the time that election was done, he won 55% of the vote. And every single poll in Winnipeg Centre but one. It's because we did the campaign. Campaigns matter, elections matter, platforms matter, candidates matter. We're incredibly proud of the candidates who are running. Robert Falcon-Ouellette is running in Southdale. Alvina Rundle, who recently won the Order of Manitoba, is running for us in the Pas-Kamisak. Nellie Monias is running for us in Kiwetinook. We have extremely strong candidates. We have an incredible team of candidates, and we know we're picking up more seats. So this isn't just a fight about who's going to win government, because quite frankly, I know that the PCs have done nothing to deserve to being re-elected. Heather Stevenson right now is pretending to be running for the federal Conservatives. The one thing we can offer is a balance of power, and that is a very real and serious possibility. So if you look at our platform and see what we're actually offering, the things we actually want to deliver to make things right, that the other parties have neglected for 10, 20, 40, 50, 60 years and more. We are actually offering justice. We are actually promising that we want to do what we can to undo the harms of the past, which frankly, the other parties have been responsible for and aren't held to account for. This is more than an election about getting rid of the PCs. It really needs to be about change, and there needs to be have a plan for that change, and we have one. So I thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to speaking to you all later. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the three gentlemen. Grand Chief Kathy Merrick is going to speak briefly, but just before she does, I would like to give a shout out to our Manitoba athletes, our citizens that participated in North American Indigenous Games, and the page on for an example, Paige Papanicus, who is here, she's been running, she participated in those North Indigenous Games, and the outcomes are on their webpage, so please let's give our athletes a round of applause.
Thank you, Kanaganak, kayse sarsipapieg, eak, and tutawago koge kay kwanigan skago agok, minutaga at takokike. So I thank the chiefs for being here to be able to listen to our next premiers, whoever it's going to be. And that we wish you well, and we thank you for listening to the concerns of leadership. I was sitting here and I was looking around, and I could probably tell you a story of all the First Nations here as to their concerns. And one of the chiefs here earlier, Chief Anderson from Murray House, his cry was about a bridge for his community, and he's been at it for several years. And hydro lines going up for our Dene relatives that are still on fuel up there. Emergency measures for that young woman that's sitting at the corner for the relocation of her community. And hospitals for the proxy sitting there for over 15,000 people in his region, and we do not have a hospital for those people, for our people that are there. And for airports, we talk about airports here and what needs to be done. And communities that have taken that initiative to prepare their own airports. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? Do you imagine that, right? So there is something wrong with the way that our people are treated. Policing is another issue from the province as well. So these are, I'm just sharing with you, and you probably know all of these, and the addiction centers, mental wellness. There's no addiction centers anywhere in any First Nation in this province when it comes to drug rehabilitation and mental health. And if there's a mental health issue, suicide crises in our First Nation, that's when everybody comes. And they leave after 3 days, leaving the communities to be able to do what needs to be done. Manitoba Hydro Act to be revisited. That's enough destruction of our lands. You know what, a comment that was made from one of the ministers, the conservative ministers? He said, that is why the golden boy is pointed north. Imagine that, eh? That's where all the resources come from. So you should turn around that golden boy if whoever's going to get in, and not leave it pointing to the north. The northeast side, all-weather road, we have heard that from our communities that are sitting here, our chiefs that are sitting here. Birthing centers. You will not find a birthing center in any First Nation in the province of Manitoba. So we want those for our women that have to leave their communities 2 weeks to go be confined somewhere in some ugly hotel in an urban area. So these things have to change, so I'm just bringing them to you. And gaming is another issue that's been very vocal around the table here. And state of emergencies, you got to the province has to change their state of emergencies, how they're declared. Because ours, First Nation people's state of emergencies are different. They're not acts of God. They come to be because of poverty. They come to be because their land is being destructed, that there's no enough financial support for our communities. So I leave that with you in a good way and in a good heart for all the 62 First Nations that we represent through the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. And we want to give you, I want to gift you on behalf of the Chiefs a treaty medal. And I give this to you that you remember our people, that you remember the treaties and how they were signed and who they represented. They represented all the chiefs that sit here today. Our ancestors did that. So we give this to you to remind you when you get into power that you remember our people, because it's our people that are going to put you there. And you remember that. And that these are, that you wear this and that you carry it and that it be blessed for all the work that you're going to do. So I call Wab, Canoe, NDP, he's seeking support from the chiefs. I cannot say anything. I'm not able to, but I'm going to be giving you this and a copy of Wabang, our tomorrow's 50th anniversary edition. You read it, and hardly anything has changed for our people since this time. So we want change. We want the chiefs want change. So we leave this with you. So my friend, you as well, we wish you well on behalf of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, and that you too will remember our people and our treaties. And our friend here, past chief, Ian Bushy, you've been there, you've heard what we have to say as leaders and what the chiefs have said today.
Really briefly, Chiefs, I also want to bring to your attention that throughout this entire day, we have had a great granddaughter observing and listening to all of you and watching your actions and how you conduct yourselves in here, as well as a grandson that has been sitting here observing. These are young people who are witnessing how leadership should behave when they come together in a respectful manner. I would hope that someday that is the same leadership that happens in the legislature, because what we see currently is not indicative of a respectful environment there. So thank you very much. I want to bring that to your attention. The 10th and the reception is still across the road. Make the time to go over and encourage the young athletes that are there. If you have the time to go over there and meet and greet for further conversation, please do. And then come back here. It's probably going to be more like 5:30. 5:30 now, to give them time to set up in here. Thank you very much. Pidama Apia.